Hey, y'all. It's me again. I realize at this point in time you may be a little tired of seeing my face. It feels like I've been on these Dog Nation video channels clogging up your social feed for like the last, 24 straight hours. But there's a reason why I'm with you right now. It's On the Beat, presented by Ingles with our good buddy Mike Griffith. A little technical issue prevents that show from coming to you the way that you've come to expect it. So I'm going to step in and help out with Mike Griffith today, who is going to join us by phone. In fact, we will get him coming up in just a moment. Now, have no fear. Your particular brand of UGA commentary that you get from Mike Griffith, you'll still get as a part of this show. I'll relay a lot of comments to him. He will give you his feedback and thoughts on those. So go ahead and get your comments into our Facebook or YouTube comment section, Twitter as well if you'd like, and we'll talk about that throughout today's program. I'll also talk about some of the stuff that Mike has recently written from DogNation.com, a couple pretty interesting pieces in particular that I want to get to. Sounds like Mike is with us and ready to go. So, Mike, welcome into your show On the Beat here, and I'm sure before we begin, you'd love to say a word of thanks to our sponsor.
Oh, no doubt about it, Brandon. Ingles does such a great job. I really enjoyed this On Big segment throughout the summer. You know, we found things to write about and talk about, and we've run into celebrities down there in Lake Oconee, from Steve Spurrier, and interviews with Pat Dye, and certainly Kirby Smart from the media days, and more news now. I mean, football hasn't started, BA, but, you know, I'm standing right outside of Buccaneer Heritage Hall. Let me tell you, there's some people moving and shaking, and you can tell the Bulldogs are getting ready to start their football practice this Friday right here in Athens.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And before I get to the questions and comments, I know a lot of folks want to talk to you, Mike, and they'll look forward to seeing you back here again in this spot on video after hearing your voice in today's show. I want to address something, a really fun story that you had at DogNation.com. It's the one involving DJ Shockley. If everyone wants to turn their textbooks to that, we'll talk about that for a moment. I thought Shockley's take on what Georgia needs, and he references the secondary. I want to read the quote here, and then we'll talk about this. DJ says to you, secondary for Georgia's got to step up. They've got to be the group that gets it done. He goes on to say the leader is J.R. Reed, so glad to have him back for senior season because of the experience he brings and his knowledge of the defense. He's going to keep everyone in line. DJ goes on to say that in this league, SEC offenses love to throw the football around. You need some big-time corners and safeties who can play man-to-man or zone coverages. I think that's an interesting comment from DJ, Mike. What I would add to that is, having been there a lot during the spring, and obviously you had a chance to see all this yourself and hear from Kirby yourself, your take on this might be different, though. I actually believe that Kirby Smart ended the spring feeling pretty confident about his defensive secondary and the challenge that it's going to face here in this upcoming season. Did you get the same sense that Georgia right now is pretty actually competent in its secondary?
Yeah, I think he feels really good about the guys he's got now. BA, they haven't sorted out who's who yet. We don't know who the who is. We don't know who the starting cornerbacks are. We don't know who the star is. And, you know, DJ talked a little bit on that WSB television show about Richard McCown, a guy that we know Kirby rides unmercifully. I mean, this is, you know, Richard McCown is kind of Kirby's Frankenstein. You know, he's his first recruit. He plays the position that Kirby oversees. Kirby knows all the talent that Richard has, and he wants absolute perfection. And I think that's what he's striving for. I think it's kind of echoing Kirby's sentiments that, you know, we know Richard has bulked up since last year. We know there was some tackle issues. With some of the bigger running backs, there were times Richard McCown had trouble getting people to the ground. We did see with our own two eyes this spring, though, you and Connor and myself and Jeff, we all see how Richard has beefed up and looks physically fit. The question now is, can he handle these more complex schemes that Kirby Smart is going to install with this Georgia defense?
A lot of folks on Facebook talking about this. D-Red says the defensive backs were looking good in the spring. I think the new defensive backs coach, Earl Warren, is going to make an impact. And, Mike, I guess you'd probably agree with that as well, that this may not have been Georgia's first choice as its defensive backs coach. We don't know that really for sure one way or another. But it was certainly a major coup to spin big and bring in a guy like Warren from an SEC school like Florida. This was a significant coaching addition, was it not? It didn't initially help with Khair Alam, who was the recruit that was on the board for February, but in terms of payoff for potentially many years to come, getting Warren would seem to be a pretty big deal.
I think it was, and I think the only reason he wasn't his first choice is because I don't think Kirby knew that he could get him. You know, those two hadn't had a whole lot of communication back when he was in the LSU DB's coach, and you know, we'd heard some rumors about maybe Derek Ansley coming from the Oakland Raiders. He ended up as the Tennessee D coordinator. But I think once Kirby and Charlton talked, They hit up on the recruiting trail, is how it turned out during this process. Because if you'll remember, Charlton Warren in Florida vehemently denied that there was original contact made 2 weeks before Kirby interviewed him. There were some rumors about him early, so it was really kind of a curious thing how those two ran into each other and how this whole thing unfolded. And I know this, when I covered back a few years ago at Tennessee, I know when Bob Shue, who coached Mississippi State, I think they had the #1 defense in the SEC last year, he did backflips when he was allowed to hire Charlton Warren. I mean, Butch Jones basically said, go out there and hire whoever you want. And they went and they got Charlton Warren, and they were thrilled to have him. He's a great teacher. He's a great motivator. His background there at the Air Force Academy brings a lot of discipline. He was known as Mr. Intensity when he was at the Air Force Academy. That was his nickname. He actually won the Mr. Intensity Award.
Wow.
And so you know what he's going to bring to that secondary, and you know why Kirby Smart would be so excited to add a guy with discipline and intensity and fundamentals. And that's what Charlton Warren brings. And I think they had a great spring, and now it's just a matter of trying to figure out, sorting it out, who's going to be out there when they run all these packages, BA, because one thing that came out of my interview with Mel Tucker out in California right before the national championship game in Santa Clara, Mel told me that they had to kind of simplify things these first few years because Kirby didn't have the kind of guys that he wanted in there necessarily. He inherited some very good players, but from a style standpoint, he didn't have exactly what he wanted. I think this year he's got exactly what he wants. And I think that Georgia's secondary is going to be more complex, and I think that's going to contribute greatly to this quest for more havoc.
Along those lines, Michael Ryan Wilson in our Facebook comment section, and hearing the talk about the defensive secondary, says, can we just please get after the quarterback? That's what Michael says. And I will admit, Mike, if you want to talk about my perspective on Georgia, going back to the start of the spring, I thought replacing DeAndre Baker was a really big deal, but I grew over the course of the spring to feel pretty good about Georgia's attempt at doing that one way or another. As you said, we don't know yet who these starters are going to be or what spots necessarily everyone's going to be in, but the raw materials would seem to be there. I kind of agree with Michael on this. In other words, that more significant issues for Georgia, you mentioned the havoc plays, rushing the passer is certainly a part of that. I'll also add to this the need to improve the rush defense. That, to me, still does not get enough conversation. That's an area in which Georgia was not particularly good a year ago, and if issues like that don't get addressed this year, then what's going on with the secondary, I think, for lack of a better phrase, will be a secondary concern because it's those other things, being better with your front seven, stopping the run. That's really, to me, the difference in Georgia winning this championship or going all the way towards contending for the championship the way that a lot of fans would like to see them do.
Yeah, I agree, Brandon, but it all goes together. And if Kirby doesn't have confidence in his secondary in terms of the experience and their ability to execute, then he's not going to take chances up front. And that's why you saw that bend but don't break. And, while Georgia wasn't nearly as aggressive as other teams, they also gave up far fewer plays at 20 yards or more. I think they gave up 21, and in the likes of LSU and Florida were up in the 58 range. So there was a flip side to that. It was you weren't going to get any cheap points off of Georgia when you think about it. There weren't very many game-breaking plays made, but that's because they were more conservative in that front seven. And Kirby explained that the reason he was more conservative in the front seven is his secondary wasn't really where he wanted it to be in terms of their experience. Richard LeCount was a fresh face, and Kirby talked a lot about that. Sometimes Richard LeCount, the assignments, they weren't always maintained very well. And Tyson Campbell was a true freshman on the corner, so he had confidence in DeAndre Baker. But, J.R. Reed's second year as a starter, they weren't where Kirby needed them to be to take chances in that front seven. Now he feels like that secondary is where it needs to be for him to be able to take some chances in that front seven. Maybe he feels better about the press coverage. Maybe he feels better about their ability to disguise, or as DJ Shockley was talking about, play multiple coverages. Maybe a little bit more complicated back there makes things a little bit more challenging for the quarterback. The whole idea is to get that quarterback confused at the line of scrimmage, right? Yeah. That's why it's so valuable. Georgia's got a guy like Jake Fromm who can see through all that mumbo-jumbo. Some quarterbacks can't. And I think they're going to see a lot of trickery and a lot of shifts and a lot of disguised coverages from Kirby Smart. Certainly we'll see a lot of different fronts. And when you think about it, you look at who they had last year. I don't really know that they had the weapons that they wanted. Losing David Marshall kind of hurt a little bit in that respect, I believe. Losing Monty Rice kind of hurt a little bit in that respect. But now they're healthier, they're deeper, they're talented. And boy, has Kirby recruited some guys in that front seven that he can turn loose. and now he's got a secondary trust to do it.
If you're just joining us, this is On the Beat, presented by Ingles, Mike Griffith's show. I'm Brandon Adams, sitting in to help out today. A little technical issue prevented Mike from being able to join us on video today, so I'm going to invite you. We have a few minutes left here. Go ahead and get your questions, comments in on Facebook or YouTube on any topic related to Georgia football, and we'll address those in the next few minutes while we're lucky enough to have Mike as a part of the program here. And Mike, as we're taking in more comments, they come rolling in. The big Georgia news yesterday doesn't involve a member of the current team. It involves potentially the future of Georgia football with the 2020 recruiting class. 5-star running back Kendall Milton announced his UGA commitment yesterday. This is a big deal for those who've been following recruiting for a long time, and certainly Milton's profile as a player makes him an exciting one for many UGA fans. What was your reaction to seeing Milton added into the fold last night?
Well, I really like his tape. You know, you look at this guy, and he's listed at 6'1", 229, but he doesn't run. He doesn't run heavy. He runs light on his feet. He's really shifty, really good change of direction and vision. I did see a couple times he got tripped up with some low ankle tackles. Those are things he'll run through in college as he gets even bigger and stronger. I mean, that's what's exciting when you watch these guys. You know, Kenny McIntosh, the same thing. I actually went back and watched video of Kenny McIntosh and Milton just to kind of compare them, because they're both bigger backs. You know, Kenny comes in about 215. He's a true freshman this year. Milton even bigger at 229. But just to kind of compare the styles a little bit, and whereas McIntosh is a little bit more of a slasher, a little bit more of a power guy, you know, Kenny at Milton at 229, you know, I like the way he's able to move in the hole. He's got really good shake, and what that means is it's going to be hard for defenders to draw a beat on him and get a square hit on him, and that's why he's always able to fall forward. I think it also tells you a little bit about what James Coley's looking for in this program moving forward as far as the type of backs that they want to have. You know, the versatility. You'll see some highlights of Milton, you know, catching the ball out of the backfield. You know, you land another 5-star like this, where they got 4 or 5 stars in the backfield now. I mean, there's a lot of talent there. He says a lot about Del McGee and the job that he's done. And hey, while I'm at it, VA, let me just throw an attaboy out there for our team. How about the job that Jeff Santel and Connor Riley did last night? And I know you were a part of that, but you know, I've been in journalism a long time, and you just don't see that sort of coverage that Jeff and Connor provided. I mean, Jeff was all over the story, and there's so many things that can go wrong as we learned today, and yet there was Jeff live. And I thought he did a phenomenal job, and I was really proud of Dog Nation last night for being all over the story like nobody else on the Georgia beat.
Yeah, that's well said. A lot of comments rolling in here as a part of our program now, or I should say Mike's program that he's been good enough to share with me for a moment here today. A number of subjects. Jody Gilreath weighing in to ask the question about Coby Dean, but the possibility that Dean, as a true freshman, could become a starter at linebacker. Mike, how would you reflect on that?
Boy, that's tough. You know, I liked what I saw from Coby Dean in the spring. I could see why Kirby was so excited about him. I mean, you know, let's face it, the guy's going to be compared to Roquan Smith. It's not fair to do that, BA, but we're going to do it anyway because he's fast and he's a playmaker. He's instinctual. He's really sharp. We know how sharp he is, how smart he is. He's going to get a grasp of the defense quickly. But you got Tate Crowder in there right now. You got kind of a crowded house with Tate Crowder and Monty Rice and Channing Tindall. I mean, there's so many guys. Quay Walker. There's so many guys competing for playing time in that linebacker core. And what I think is going to happen with Dan Lanning and Glenn Schumann, I think we're going to see committee stuff. Not because nobody's good enough, but because everybody's so good. And so I think you're going to see different guys in different packages. And, you know, I wouldn't get caught up so much on who's going to start. You know, to me, it looks to me like the tent pegs of this defense are guys like J.R. Reed and Monty Rice. I think those two guys are earmarked for starting job and leadership positions from Kirby Smart. Certainly we'll see Nolan Smith flash. What ability he has there at outside linebacker. He's going to create some absolute havoc. But to the question of Coby Dean, this is a guy who, if he doesn't start this year, I'd bet the house on him as a starter as a sophomore and probably an all-SEC player as a sophomore. So he's going to play a lot of snaps. I don't know the particulars or the semantics of who starts and who comes in when and where. We'll see him out there, though, because he's a playmaker. But as far as being a starter at the mic, I'm not sure that's going to happen right out of the gate.
Another question that comes in from James Crump about the star position. He means the fifth defensive back between Tyreek McGee and Devad Wilson, and obviously Webb as part of that conversation as well. You know, Mike, one of the things I think we're going to see a lot from Kirby Smart as we head towards the season and throughout the season is I think Kirby's going to challenge this position in particular to be physical this year. What we've seen from Kirby the last couple of years is they have a couple different kinds of stars. They'll have a linebacker at star who can kind of go up against some big body guys on the other side, or sometimes they take that guy out and put more of the fifth defensive back. I think this year they're looking for whoever ends up manning that position, and I would probably make the point spread favorite Devad Wilson here, but whoever they make that guy in that position, I believe they're going to ask for some physicality from that guy so that it can be almost that sort of hybrid tweener between the defensive back and a linebacker. I think that's kind of what they want there. Whoever it is, they want that guy that can match up a big body on the other side. I think Devad Wilson's got a chance to be that guy, but there's a pretty, I think, specific is the word I'm looking for. There's a pretty specific set of skills that Kirby, I believe, is looking for from that fifth defensive back right now.
Yeah, no doubt. And as we were talking about earlier in the conversation, this is one of those spots where Kirby didn't have his kind of guy, and he wasn't really able to do what he wanted with this position. I think Tyreek McKee has done yeoman's work there. I think he's been adequate, but no more than adequate, certainly. I think Devad Wilson is a candidate. He made the comeback last year from that knee injury, played late in the year. I think that gave him some confidence and some momentum going into the spring. He had a real good spring. But let me tell you, Mark Webb's had a good offseason, too. I think this is going to be another spot, BA, where it kind of depends on the opponent and how they scheme it up and what they want from that position. I mean, if you're playing a run-heavy team, maybe you play a little bit more physical guy at the star like a Devad Wilson. Maybe if you're playing a more pass-oriented team, maybe we see a little bit more of Tyreek McKee or Mark Webb. And here's another thought. Tyreek Stevenson, Tyreek the Freak, as he's known around these parts, has had an incredible spring, is an incredible talent. I don't know if he's going to beat out Tyson Campbell for that spot opposite of Eric Stokes or not. But if Stevenson or Campbell isn't on the field at corner, might they be the star or in certain packages a dime? Again, this is Kirby Smart now with 4 rotational cycles of recruiting, having the kind of guys that he wants. So I think we're going to see a lot of committee work. When I met up with a player I bumped into in downtown Athens recently, and I asked him about some of these position battles and how do you guys stay so friendly? I said, when there's so much competition, he said, we know we're all going to play. There's a plan for all of us. And I took from that, and we listened closely to Kirby Smart, and he's kind of said the same thing. So, those first few weeks of the season, those first couple weeks, I don't want to call it a scrimmage. I think Vanderbilt could be a little difficult for the first half of football there in Nashville on August 31st. But then you played Murray State and Arkansas State, and it's kind of like scrimmages, right?
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to watch how that plays out. But I do think, Brandon, that Kirby's going to have different packages, and all these names we're talking about, I think we're going to see all these guys on the field at different times making plays.
It's kind of funny. You mentioned a lot of names there. The name that you don't mention, though, that I do think is worthy of consideration, too, is DJ Daniel, the junior college transfer. And, Mike, as you know,
another one.
Georgia typically would not go after a junior college transfer in the secondary. That's just not what Georgia would do, which leads you to believe there must be something about Daniel in particular that Georgia likes. Also, in our comment section, John Benton mentioned the idea of Adam Anderson in kind of a star position type role. That's what Lorenzo Carter did for Georgia from time to time. That's a little bit different than the typical defensive back. I think Kirby kind of wants to get away from that. You mentioned Mark Webb. He's about 200 pounds. Devad Wilson's listed on the official side at 195. Those are guys that give you a chance to play against some bigger bodies without taking them out of the game. They can run and in some cases match the physicality. I think that's what Kirby Smart wants the future of this position to be, but I wouldn't put it past him using Anderson a bit in a role like what Lorenzo Carter occasionally occupied for the Dogs going back to 2017.
Well, here's the deal. Let's just cut right to the chase here, Brandon. When push comes to shove, it's all about matching up with Alabama in the SEC championship game. And Alabama's got receivers like no one else. And LSU's opening up their offense, by the way. So it comes down to when it's the first week of December and Georgia's playing that game that's going to put them in the college football playoff. They got to have the DBs to match up with that Alabama receiving corps. Because that Alabama receiving corps is the real deal, man. You saw it. Nobody else could match those Bama receivers like Georgia did. That's what Georgia did. Everybody wondered what Georgia did. They matched those Bama receivers early. Clemson took a page out of the Georgia playbook, by the way. Clemson can send Kirby a thank you card at any point. I'm sure he appreciated it. But Georgia was able to scheme up Alabama, and they had the talent in the secondary to match those receivers. And here's the things that make Dogs fans thrilled. They're even better this year. I know they lost DeAndre Baker, and you might say, how can they be better when they lose a first-round draft pick? It's because everybody else got better, and they've recruited really well. the Georgia secondary, the Georgia back seven, is going to take the biggest step on the football team. That linebacking core is going to take a quantum leap with the experience, with a healthy Monty Rice, with Tate Crowder now 1 year further into his transition from running back. I mean, you've seen that guy, B.A. He's got an NFL line. I mean, he is a specimen. Tate Crowder's a senior. The clock is running. You're going to see a sense of urgency out of Tate this year. You plug those kind of guys in with the talent that Kirby's recruited, and now year 4 of his scheme, and the continuity that he's had on his coaching staff, and then you talk, as you brought up at the start of the show, you bring in an educator and a disciplinarian, a fundamental guy like Charlton Warren. I mean, I'm telling you, Georgia is licking their chops, man, and it's going to be all that these guys can do to take it one game at a time. That's going to be hard. They're going to go into Vanderbilt. I feel sorry for Vanderbilt. I think Derek Mason might have been trying to make good with Kirby so he doesn't run up the score when he called him a brother. At halftime, he's going to walk by and say, "Remember, man, you're my brother. Keep the score down," right? Because I think Georgia is going to come out like they're shot out of a cannon, and pity Arkansas State and Murray State, because I think Kirby's got to turn Jake Fromm loose, Brandon. Last year you had to worry about, is Dustin Fields going to get his snaps, blah, blah, blah. This year you got to make sure that Jake Fromm is in tune with that receiving core. And Kirby's not a guy that really wants to run up the score, but he's got to get his passing game in sync. I think Georgia's got to let loose at quarterback. And, some of those scores, we're not used to seeing Georgia blow it up like that. But I think you got to get Jake Fromm some game reps with these young receivers. And, pity Arkansas State and Murray State for being in the way these first few weeks.
Mike, let's finish up with this. Gary and Christian Gulisano, great question in our Facebook comment section about tight end, what the depth behind Charlie Warner looks like. Warner's obviously a guy that a lot of folks are hoping has that breakout year. He would seemingly have the athleticism to be able to do that. I know you provide a lot of coverage of Eli Wolf over the course of the offseason, and I think there's some excitement about John Fitzpatrick, a guy that was a four-star signee for Georgia from the 2018 class out of Marist, and to say nothing about Brett Seither coming back from injury. What is the state of the tight ends right now? It's a hot topic for 2020 recruiting, but how about the guys in the 2019 roster? How do you evaluate these tight ends at the moment?
Well, you're right about Charlie Warner and Eli Wolf. I mean, these are two seniors that are hungry. They've got NFL scouts looking at them. I talked to the Senior Bowl executive director when I was in Hoover, Jim Nagy. He was there. I'll actually have a piece on that in the next few days. Both of those guys are on Senior Bowl radar. And Senior Bowl guys get drafted, about 80% of them. So that's a pretty good indicator. Charlie was coming off that broken leg last year. And I'm not sure he was really 100%. I mean, he was healed. But again, when guys are coming off injuries, I just don't know if they're really all there. But obviously Charlie now is completely healthy. He's a team leader. He's one of Jake's better friends on the team. And I expect that Charlie will be a safety valve. I think he's a guy that, he can handle the blocking. He does a lot of great downfield blocking. Kirby Smart likes to talk about that in the press conferences. Guys like me, and you bring up that great run by DeAndre Swift, and Kirby starts talking about how well Charlie Warner blocked downfield. And that is important, and that isn't what separates and springs these guys on long runs. So I'm excited about Charlie Warner. I think he's going to have a solid season. I think he's going to play in the NFL. I don't look for breakout crazy numbers because, Georgia plays a lot of double tight end, and I think Eli Wolf was brought in to play that same role that Isaac Nada did, on the left side there. And as J.R. Reed said, Eli Wolf is sneaky fast. The last time I talked with Eli Wolf's dad a couple months ago, Eli was running in a 4.5 range. That's pretty good for a guy that's 238, 240. So he could create some matchups. It wasn't so long ago. He was in Hoover himself representing Tennessee. Jeremy Pruitt picked Eli Wolf as one of 3 Tennessee guys to represent their program. He was a team captain there. So this is a guy with a lot of discipline that's been coached up. I think he's looking for kind of a breakout year, and certainly Georgia provides a tremendous platform. And then you mentioned John Fitzpatrick. And the size of this guy just will overwhelm you. I mean, you talk about tall and lanky and catch radius. And, John has worked hard. And I saw some of the videos in the spring when they were doing those hit drills. Let me tell you, he was mixing it up with some tough guys at linebacker. So I'm not going to overlook John Fitzpatrick. I think Georgia's depth there is no more than adequate. I don't know how good I feel. I think ideally you want one more guy that is healthy with experience. As Kirby says, he's never satisfied. I think there's still a little bit of need. They may be a little shy, and that's why I'll have a story out this afternoon, Brandon, where I talk about 3 things about the running backs, and a very key element of that story is how I expect different guys to be used in the passing game, and part of the reason why I think they'll rely on the running backs isn't just because of the inexperience at receiver, but also maybe a little bit of that depth issue at tight end.
Mike, before we say goodbye here, and first of all, thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of your show here today, and our friends at Ingles for making it all possible. A final thought from you on anything?
Are you ready for practice to start Friday, man?
Yeah.
I mean, this has been a long off season for Georgia. We know that there were some ups and downs in the spring. There were a few off-field issues that Kirby had to get his guys through. I think some lessons were learned. I think some leaders stepped up. The feeling that I have in Athens is this is an edgy football program. This is an edgy football program, Brandon. You know, you thought they were edgy last year after losing a national title game to Alabama. You know, they let another 2-touchdown lead against Alabama slip away, and then they got dissed by the College Football Playoff Committee. They had to answer a lot of questions off season that brought their mental toughness and whether or not they can get past Alabama. And everybody's sick of hearing about it. And Kirby's sick of hearing about it. And Kirby Smart's telling everybody that 12 wins this season isn't enough at Georgia. I mean, think about that. Put that in some historical context. I don't know what program isn't happy with 12 wins, but the building I'm sitting in the Buttsmere Heritage Hall Museum right now as I speak to you, and I look over these trophies and these awards, and I know that on the other side of this museum, there's a locker room filled with guys that want to get their piece and lay down their legacy. It hasn't happened yet, but Georgia is on the verge. Until it happens, though, this is going to be an edgy place. That's the word I would use to describe Athens, and this Georgia football campus right now is edgy. They're on the verge, man. It can't get here soon enough.
Boy, that's a great way to close out our program today. Mike, how about one more big thank you for the sponsor who's made all this possible?
No doubt. You know, Ingles does such a great job with his On the Beat segment, Brandon. I do some stories that are on the beat. I enjoy doing those stories as well. I like to put some of my best content out there because Ingles brings their best to their customers every day. And I completely endorse them and appreciate their support on Dog Nation.
All right, great stuff, Mike. Thanks so much for your time, and thanks for delivering On the Beat here each and every week. We'll look forward to reading you this week, including Friday, as you said, when practice starts going and heading towards the start of the season, August 31st, against the Vanderbilt Commodores. Mike, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate you being here as a part of On the Beat, presented by Ingles, and we will look forward to speaking to all of you again very soon. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for Dog Nation Daily. Mike will be a part of that, too, given the fact that it's a Wednesday, and we'll have a whole lot more fun and surprise between now and the start of the upcoming season. You'll have a great day. We'll look forward to speaking to you again on these same video channels very soon.